Fantastic. I think we're live. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Transformation, the Brutal Truth series. If you don't know me or we haven't met before, my name is Ben Dickey and I'm the CRO and co-founder of the HiveMind Network. And HiveMind is a trusted community of experienced innovation, technology, transformation and change specialists and practitioners. We have a set of shared values aligned around our mission to help organizations shift from ambition to building future-ready capabilities and delivering lasting value to your organization and your stakeholders. And I'm joined this morning by Catherine Hayes. Morning, Catherine.
Morning.
And Catherine's going to be walking through the session with me this morning, sharing her perspective and her experience as an organization sustainability and change resilience specialist. She's been a member of the visiting faculty at Bayes, formerly the Cass Business School, and she's a published author. She published a book on transition leadership, navigating the complexities of organizational change. So she's well placed to help us go through the complexities of transformation and help to navigate us through this call successfully, as well as transformation activities. So we're going to be going in the series into a deeper dive into some of Catherine's work in the sixth and final session, where we're going to be peeling back the outer layers of change resilience and the change resilience crisis, and how Catherine's worked with organisations to build up more change resilient capabilities. But a perspective and her opinion is going to be equally valuable as we get this first session kicked off. So why do we call it the Brutal Truth series? For me, we were really keen just to have an open, pragmatic and grounded conversation about transformation, why it works, why it's difficult. We're not here to provide silver bullets or big inspirational graphics, but rather try and get to the truth and provide some clarity on why the common failure patterns that we see are still occurring in transformation programs. And ultimately, Catherine, as we were talking last night, knowing and actually facing up to some of the hard things really early when we're approaching change is critical to ensure future success. So we want to invite your engagement. So whilst this is going to be a dialogue and a conversation and a little bit of back and forth between Catherine and I, you're hopefully seeing on screen the chat function. I can see people are in and saying hello already, which is great. And we're also going to look to take to gain your insight. So we're going to run a couple of polls throughout the session today. Probably going to spend around about 30 minutes with you all in total, and then we'll have time at the end for any questions, some Q&A, and let's get into it. So what we're not here to do is pitch HiveMind. We're not going to share any glossy case studies, and we're not going to get into the theory of transformation. Really, it's about us sharing real world experience, sharing from the history that HiveMind's got, working with customers and an individual practitioner experience. Over the next 6 weeks, we're going to go through and help provide clarity to these three really important questions on the transformation journey. So we're going to explore some of the invisible forces that derail transformation programs that often start at the point of readiness before you get started. Some of the topics that we'll cover will be familiar. Some might be a little too familiar, but the goal isn't for us to point the finger of blame. It's really to provide some clarity, because once we can see things clearly, we're able to lead more deliberately. So let's get into it. We're going to cover some of the quiet risks that all organisations are facing. We'll get into a really interesting topic Catherine and I were talking through last night, called systemic blindness, and we'll explain what we mean by that. We'll have the opportunity to hear some of Catherine's real-world experience, where she's helped organisations diagnose some problems in transformation programs and put them back on track. And then we'll share some reflections at the end and take your questions. So often when we talk about transformation, a lot of the focus, the strategy, and really the driving forces are usually pointing towards the left-hand side of this slide. The real the focus is around what's happening in the external environment outside the organization. That could be new legislation and regulations. It could be challenges in the geopolitical environment and supply chains, environmental issues, obviously technological advancement. AI is everywhere, and even challenges from competitors. But it's rarely these external factors and external complexities that derail transformation programs. So we're going to be focusing today on the internal complexity, because that's where the real risks lie. That's where the transformation programs and transformation effort is often derailed. It's around the structural and cultural challenges within the system. Catherine, I think that was one of the things we talked about in preparation for the session. The internal complexities in organisations.
Absolutely. I think the thing that gets frequently overlooked is if you look at it from a logical point of view, if your system is functioning well and it's working and it's connected and joined up, it's one of the factors that I found with my 20 odd years of research, is high performing organizations operate as integrated systems. In practice, there's no excuse for having complexity and ambiguity on the inside of an organization. The true factors of where complexity and ambiguity comes from is in the external environment. But when you don't have an integrated system, when you don't have the resilient capabilities, and the system isn't joined up and isn't interconnected, this is where you get what I call unnecessary complexity and ambiguity. Of course, the problem with that then becomes is, how are you going to be able to respond to the stuff that's constantly happening in the external environment if you're constantly falling over your invisible shoelaces trying to navigate the complexity and ambiguity within your own existing environment? So that's one of the key factors, Ben, that frequently gets overlooked.
No, that's perfect and really helpful clarity. So this is where we're going to be getting started. And if you've got those invisible shoelaces, as you call them, in your organization, no new technology system or platform, no wonderful and ambitious new strategy, and sadly even no amount of external consulting help and support is going to be able to push a transformation program through successfully in an overly complex internal environment. So we went through some of the I guess leading stats and data on transformation failure and transformation programs in general. some of these will be really familiar. Bain and McKinsey, both as well as other organisations, have big numbers on the success or failure rates of transformation programs. McKinsey, I think, says over 70% fail. Bain, only 12% achieve a sustained success. But what's become more and more obvious is it's the people and the people side and the people risk within and alignment in programs that really makes the difference between success and failure. And I was reading a couple of weeks ago how the majority of large enterprise organizations today have 2 or more what they call transformation programs running at any one time. So adding multiple complex programs on top of an already at times not so well understood but complex internal system. The reverse side of that coin, or in the 12%, as Bain see it, the multipliers that are available to organizations when they do successfully land and sustain their transformation efforts can have an accelerated impact on business performance, as well as the organization and the people within it. I think I'm not sure, Catherine, from your experience where you've seen the successful programs achieve these multiplying results.
Absolutely. I think my experience is that once you build the infrastructure, once people know what they don't know about what are the dynamics that are informing their systems, change just becomes a natural evolutionary part of the process. But the factor that you get is that if you just focus on, like, one of the challenges you get is that there's this tendency to focus on the change methodology and follow the methodology. But if you've not built the resilient capabilities of how and if you don't pay attention to the how and the impact of that and how that's operating in relationship to how the business and the organization functions, then that becomes the factor. I mean, one of the things that I found was that when people know what they don't know, there's no longer invisible shoelaces because they can see what they are. Mm-hmm. And they can see, okay, that's a key factor. That's a core dynamic. Classic one you get a lot of is expert-based cultures that are derived from people with depth in technical knowledge and expertise. Once they know the dynamics and the factors that inform that, they can fully leverage that expertise, but they can also put into place factors to mitigate the risks of the different dynamics that happen. For example, when we're good at something, if we do that for a long period of time and we keep doing it, there's also an unintended consequence. But if we know what that is, or if we know what that unintended consequence is, we then don't fall over it, and therefore then we can do something about it. So when something's working and it's positive, there's also an unintended consequence if you keep doing more and more of the same dynamic and not realizing what's informing it. Mm-hmm. So these are the factors, is when you know what you don't know, you cannot not know it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, yeah. And I think that it talks to how the leadership alignment with the organization's purpose and how that flows down into how transformation programs are communicated effectively, and the impact that has on aligning the people to support that effort. One of the things that you've made me think about is when people knowing what they don't know and how to spot that. Really, what are the symptoms or signals that organizations could look out for to identify when they've got problems with performance, be that in the organization generally or in the middle of one of these change and transformation programs?
I think it's it's asking a question. You know, if somebody says this doesn't work, the first question I always have back is, well, what doesn't work, and why doesn't it work? Do you understand why it doesn't work? And it's like, well, you know, people are not utilizing the technology. Well, why are they not utilizing that technology? What's informing it? What are the factors that are having that impact? And quite often you don't get a response. Quite often it's do you know what the dynamics are that are informing why that is not working? And then you get the kind of blink look. So it's that if you can answer the question as to, and this is the interesting factor, if you can answer the question as to why something doesn't work, then you've got the leverage, you've got the resources to be able to do something about it. And this is the challenge we're seeing today, is technology is making people impatient. They're not investing the time, the energy, or the effort to understand what are these core dynamics that are informing how the system is working. So, you know, great point there in terms of the red flag checklist, but you get a lot of activity because everybody gets focused on the outcome, like get the goal, get the thing, get the new technology in, get the new systems in, get the new factors working. But actually, what's happening in that system? And I think these are great points here in Ben, in terms of, you know, there are a number of factors, and again, this gets overlooked. I utilize the term honoring complexity, but there are a number of different factors that relate to these invisible shoelaces that we've just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So, and we pulled together this list over over a number of years, but in advance of this session, really because we want to invite input and feedback from the audience on any of these factors that exist in your organisation today, or any of these factors that you see and recognise in the transformation programs. So I think we're going to publish a poll on that in a second, and we'd love to hear from you on if you recognise and see this list of red flags in your organisation, and if you see those as Catherine calls them, part of your invisible shoelaces, then we can provide support in how you understand what they look like and how to tie them up. So we'll give the attendees a few seconds to answer that poll. Busy but no impact was coming out on top. And then it's been overtaken by constant change and nothing landing or nothing sticking.
Classic.
The more votes that come in, the more evenly spread the polls looking.
Which resonates, doesn't it, with the point of a number of these factors influence. It's not one, there are multiple factors that influence these dynamics that we see happening in organizations. Absolutely,
and I think it talks to the point about internal complexity. It's as you said before, lots of organizations, leaders as well, you know, don't know what they don't know, and so not understanding the complexity of the system. And as we come to the story and example that you shared, that we'll share, and just looking at the time, we might need to move into that next. I think because it does a really good job of highlighting something probably, certainly that wasn't known, but and maybe was foreseeable if if the right level of readiness was put into the program. So yeah, I mean, we talked about the risks, the sort of the risks that really derail transformation programs, often really slowly and quietly. It's not a big bang type of impact with this complexity in systems, and it's not often easy to see or spot. Transformation programs that I've seen and been involved in really always start well intended, often really well funded and supported, and still get stuck, don't deliver, or lose momentum and drift off course. And as we've talked about, a lot of the reasons for this is organisations don't necessarily understand what's happening in the end-to-end system. So I think for just with the interest of time, we can come back to this and share some of these slides. But I'm really keen to get into the story you shared with me last night, Catherine, on the work you were doing with the healthcare organisation.
Yeah, sure. I was invited into with a healthcare organisation who couldn't understand why they put in a new roster system, and they didn't understand why that this roster system, nobody was using it, nobody was working with it. They'd done it. It was done with a positive intent to support people from having to go in and do things manually, having to go into the office and then having to go to their patients' homes to take care of them. And they thought it would be easier, and they thought it would get data. So it was done with a positive intent, and it would make the scheduling and rescheduling easier, and lots of things would be done. But they didn't understand why. They'd put the system in. They'd set up training courses, quite comprehensive training courses of how to use it. Yet people weren't filling data into the system. They were still going into the office and still doing the manual system. So when we started to explore it, and I started to ask these questions, and I said, "Can I, let me go and talk to these nurses. Let me go and talk to these carers. Let's go and look at this dynamic." And then people started. Pretty much most people that I spoke to were very emotional. Quite a number of them cried, and they said, "What going and setting something up on a roster on my mobile phone, not going into the office." What they completely overlooked was the fact that going into the office was the only support we ever had for each other and supporting each other. We're supporting people to die. So if we go on our phone and then we go to a patient, we've got no one to support us. When I go in and I fill in the roster manually, I've got a bunch of people around me. I've got people that can help me say, "Look, we're all in this together, and you're not on your own. We can all work together. We can support each other. Yes, it's tough, but that's our job. That's the decision we've made." And it really helped us. That whole system really helped us find a way of doing it. And it was one of the things that both the organisation themselves, before initiating the technology, hadn't noticed, didn't know. It was also one of the things that these people didn't know. It was only when they were asked not to do it and utilise their mobile phones, as in utilising the technology, did they realise what the implications were of it. But it pulled out a number of different dynamics in terms of not knowing or not understanding, just taking something as the norm. Obviously, when that norm stops, what's the implications of it? But also, more importantly, what has to be put in place to mitigate any risks of the impact of the old ways of working and the old ways of doing things? What impact do they have on people's psychological safety? What impact do they have on people's capacity for being an attention to doing things in a particular way? Because that's one of the things when I investigated change resistance and resilience was, if we don't know what we don't know that are informing the dynamics and the norms that we're doing, how can we then mitigate the risks of interrupting those norms? So none of those factors were looked into. and people were utilizing any opportunity they could to go into the office as a way of mitigating being on their own, feeling lonely, and not quite knowing what to do or where to go to or how to work.
Yeah, it's the what you were talking about earlier in terms of the unintended consequences. Even if we're doing things that are positive, we're doing things with the right intentions. And I think what I've really valued from this story and experience was, for all intents and purposes, you've got a transformation or a technology implementation program that's been successful by typical terms of a transformation program or an implementation program. The technology was implemented on time, on budget. The the delivery work was a success, but actually by measuring the outcomes and the people impact, it was an unmitigated failure and had a significant negative impact on the workforce and ultimately the work and the care that was able to be provided.
Absolutely. And it's also this factor, there's one of the dynamics or the unintended consequences of what happens, and particularly with technology implementation, is that the outcome or the thing that's going to get the result, which is the technology, is where the primary focus of intent comes, not looking at the picture around it, both in two dimensions. What's working? How is it working? What's not working? Why is it not working? And not understanding those factors. And then more importantly, how big is that transitional shift going to be once that technology's gone in?
Mm-hmm.
Something that, as you know, I've repeatedly seen it for pretty much my whole career, that time is not invested in understanding those dynamics through multiple lenses. Hence why I developed the diagnostics to help organizations to know what they don't know, basically.
Sure, no, and I think it perfectly talks to organizational readiness before embarking on a change program or transformation. Leaning into what you said at the beginning around leaders and organizations not knowing what they don't know. How ready are you for the change? And really that has to start with how well do you understand where you are now, as well as where it is that you want to be, and properly understanding the long-term enduring impact of the journey that you're going on.
Absolutely. And about these number of factors that come into play. Leaders don't know what they don't. Many leaders, organizational leaders, and don't see what their part is in playing in creating that supportive environment. They don't understand the dynamics that are informing the culture, and understanding how that works. What is the capacity and what is their resilience in terms of how they're initiating and how they're focusing around that, and also where when you get this outcome focus and the alignment into that, and you're looking totally into that and completely ignoring the other factors that are informing the system.
Mm-hmm. And I think in my experience, the leaders that we've worked with at HiveMind, it's not that they don't care. They genuinely care deeply, and they're really motivated to achieve the best outcomes that they can for their organization, their people, and their teams. It's just that sometimes these blind spots exist within the system, and like the example that you gave in the healthcare organization, it's not until you make some changes, sometimes if you haven't invested the time up front to understand really how the whole system works, it's not until you change something that you see the red flag waving, or you hear the grind of the gears coming to a halt in a failure. From I think like I say, most organisations, I think that we've worked with and that I've been employed by have get the vision bit right. Usually, they're really clear on where they want to go, but it's in it's in building those aligned, enduring capabilities that the real challenge is. And I think that's where we see, that's where we see the change fatigue bubbling to the surface as well. So one mindful time. I think we planned to talk for 30 minutes, and we're just about over there. We wanted to invite your participation again in a poll, looking at again the internal complexity in the organisation. Really keen to hear from folks that are with us on which of these risks currently you see or are aware of in your organisation. Any thoughts, Catherine, while people are filling in that poll on which of these you see most frequently, or you see causing organisations the greatest challenge?
I think they're all interconnected and interrelated, to be honest. Leaders don't know what they don't know about what does supportive leadership behaviour be. How do you create that supportive environment for that change to take place? Things like being sponsors of the change and encouraging that change, and creating the engagement, engaging people in that process, not really understanding the dynamics that are informing a culture. I mean, culture is just repeated patterns of behavior. The question is, what are those repeated patterns of behavior? And more importantly, what's informing them? Which leads into the root causes of problems that are not addressed. If you don't know what you don't know about why something is not working, or if you don't know what you don't know about what are the dynamics of a culture, how are you going to be able to then mitigate the risks around those factors? How you can be able to see them? The more complexity and ambiguity you have in an environment, the more dynamics you get people then not being able to see too many things. You get too many invisible shoelaces, but more importantly, then people get overwhelmed. The more overwhelmed they become, then they step back. They then get accused. I've seen it in many organizations, they then get accused of resisting change. And actually what it is what I call ambiguity and complexity overwhelm. You've got multiple levels of things they're trying to initiate. Classic one you see is different parts of the business are all initiating lots of different types of change projects. And all of a sudden, the workforce are on the receiving end of it. So you might get, marketing, you might get finance, you might get a risk project, you might get a HR project. Boom, next thing you know, everybody's trying to cope with all of these different change projects all at the same time, because the way in which nobody's looking at the whole system. Hang on, how many change projects are we asking people to absorb? And of course, then as a consequence to that, if you've got that going on, that will tell you that you've got dysfunctional and outdated systems and processes, because if you didn't, then you wouldn't be overwhelming your system with lots and lots of different change projects, programs, different factors in different ways. So all of these factors are interconnected, and they all kind of all mostly inform one another, basically.
It's it's fascinating, and it's a pattern that's absolutely alive and living in a number of current client organisations that we're working with, as well as what it looks like based on the feedback on the poll. A number of organisations that have joined us on the call this morning. The overwhelming favourite or most clicked answer on the poll was to do with dysfunctional or outdated systems and processes, and I think that that talks to what you were saying there about organisations looking to put a new ERP system, HRIS system, CRM system into the business, all at the same time, or all at overlapping times. It also kind of highlights and talks to the one of the earlier slides that we jumped a little bit past, because I wanted to make sure we got to hear your story from the healthcare organisation. But lots of organisations, because of the rapid pace of change in the external environment, and as we've touched on, not necessarily either making or having the time to reflect on how the internal systems working, how the internal operating model is functioning. The models and the governance that exists in organisations today is not able to cope with the pace of change and the complexity and ambiguity that exists both outside and inside the in the business. So I mean, something that we've seen often, and we were talking about yesterday, shifting priorities in in quarter or on a quarterly basis, decision making systems, and in organizations sometimes decision paralysis, or really just the authority and the power, distributed decision making and distributed authority not put in the right places in organizations to enable them to respond and adapt and move at the pace that's needed sometimes. And often what happens is the organizations then look for a place to point the finger of blame. So it's in the software, it's in the technology, it's in the people, or the consultants. And taking the time to really understand the system and how it works will enable organizations to build operating models that are fit for the pace of change that they're trying to that they need to make and are trying to make. So I think open to questions now. If you've got any questions for Catherine or I, based on what you've listened to this morning or what you've seen, please put them in the chat, and we'll try and take them. I need to get some new glasses or make my screen bigger, because I'm struggling to read that. Questions come from Ruth. Catherine, how do organisations mitigate against the problems surfaced by multiple change projects, or even recognise them in the first place?
Well, obviously, first of all, it's knowing how your system is functioning and understanding what those dynamics are, making sure that you've got strategic and operational systemic alignment. So a classic one you get is that strategy is created at the top by the leaders. It's then chucked over the fence to the workforce to initiate, but things like purpose are not cascaded down. So a classic one with when purpose is cascaded down throughout the whole system, it's very clear. Everything that you then do is either in or out of alignment with that purpose. If something is out of alignment with that purpose, then you shouldn't be doing it. So integrating purpose integration, strategic integration, building those factors. Also around the capabilities, so supporting people to develop what I would call core capabilities around how do you work with that and honor and work with complexity, and putting those practices into the business, helping people to develop capabilities around working with ambiguity and working with those different factors and not knowing, helping the system then to be able to see itself and then benchmark that. It's surprising how much purpose integration in alignment with a strategic intent of where are we going and objectives surprising how much unnecessary complexity and ambiguity that takes out of a system. So it's making sure that you've got that. I utilize it as I talk about it as a pyramid, but when you've got those factors of the pyramid and the purpose at the top, and you cascade that into your system, and then you build those capabilities, your system just naturally joins itself up. And then you cannot know what you cannot know about your system, because it's all on the table. It's very clear.
Okay, no, perfect. Thanks for that, Catherine. And Laura's probably made a point rather than asking a question, but I think it's really valid. She said, I think the ability to step back and make sense of what is happening is challenged in these processes, which perpetuates the challenges, of course, and not always clear whose responsibility it is to do the making sense of it part. And I think that's the key point.
That's absolutely spot on. But again, that links in when you've got integrated purpose. So if we take the example, Walt Disney's purpose is to make people happy. If I'm responsible for a costume design team, then my purpose of my team is to create costumes for the products that to make people happy through Walt Disney's purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you've got that purpose integrated? It then becomes it's really clear to see if this isn't in our alignment with our purpose, why are we doing it? If it is, then do we put the effort? That's where we put the effort into doing it. So it's absolutely spot on. And I like the comment here. Clear who's responsible. It's really clear when you've got that integration. It's very clear who you're going to hold to account for. If I'm responsible for the costume design team, you're going to hold me to account for it. So it takes away, it makes it very clear and very aligned.
Perfect, thanks, Catherine. There's a couple more questions that have come through. Mindful of the time, Laura asked a follow-up question, which I think is really relevant to what you were talking about. What would your view be on co-creating purpose versus cascading purpose?
It's a both and. So co-creating purpose is something that is naturally done because it's collectively owned. So you're bringing something, you're utilizing diversity of thought to co-create that purpose. That's a collective ownership. Then cascading it is then ensuring. So for example, if an exec team co-creates a purpose, then the people in that exec team who are owning the various different parts of the organization, it's then their accountability to ensure that what they're accountable and responsible for has a purpose. So if your finance team, your IT team, your finance team should have a purpose. That should be cascaded down into team roles, into individual roles. So when we go back and we look at things like unnecessary ambiguity and complexity, if I don't know what my purpose and my role is, well, what will I go off and will I do? And of course, I'm going to create a mess. If I know what my purpose and my role is, that's where I put my focus. That's where I put my intent. If I'm leading a team, and we know what our purpose is, that's where we put our focus and our intent. So it's a both and. It's co-creating it and then ensuring that it's cascaded right throughout the system, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Makes perfect sense, Catherine. Thank you. So we've put some points on here, really just for reflection and takeaway. Questions to think about in your organisations when you're back to the day job. We haven't got time to go through them now, but we can send out the pack to those that have attended, and then one final point for us really is just to let you know that this. Yeah, if this session has done its job and hopefully it's raised some important questions and given an opportunity to reflect on the importance of really understanding the complexities in your own systems and whether or not you're fit and ready for executing on the journey that you're on. And this is just the first session of 6 in the series that we've designed to look at the most common challenges and failure points when organisations are transforming Just to acknowledge those challenges exist, and to provide some thoughts and ideas and reflections learned through experience on what can be done to overcome those. So it's not going to be a linear journey, as it says on, or as you can see on the screen. But if we're going to be here on Friday at the same time every week for the next 5 weeks. So next week I'll be joined by Barry Flack, and we'll be going through human first transformation. So building on the foundations that we've set in this call with Catherine, and then we'll be moving into delivery. So we'll be unpacking a little bit on the role of the CIO, where, especially as we talked about earlier, there's multiple technology platforms and investments happening. How the CIO can ensure proper technology enablement across the organization, and then looking at the invisible forces inside the team's capabilities that are either accelerating or derailing change. And then over the final 2 weeks, we're going to look at outcomes, value, and then Catherine's going to be back in week 6 to cover the resilience crisis and how we can build more sustainable organizations and change resilient capabilities. So I hope you've enjoyed this morning's session, and I look forward to seeing you all on Friday next week. Thank you very much.